What is happening to the planet this year with all these massive earthquakes and this destruction, this catastrophic loss that is happening all over the place? We have like boom, one after the other, the ones that stick out. I mean, Venezuela, 7.2, 39 seconds later, 7.5, and now Indonesia, and it's everywhere, Japan. But seriously, I mean, look at what has happened. Magnitude 7.8 in the Philippines. I just reported about this. Mexico, we had Colombia, and now this devastating magnitude 7.7 in Indonesia. Buildings collapsing, landslides cutting off communities, this unusual swarm of aftershocks. More aftershocks in 2 days than at the 9.2 Tohoku earthquake in Japan or Kamchatka. This is crazy. There is something going on. I'm putting that in the end screen. But now let's talk global. Tsunami warnings. Thousands of people lost their lives. People running onto the streets again and again when another enormous earthquake appears somewhere on the map. And these are not like magnitude 4 earthquakes. These are not magnitude 5 earthquakes. These are major earthquakes, magnitude 7 and above. And they're all much above magnitude 7. They're getting close to magnitude 8. So as of right now this year in 2026, we had 11 magnitude 7 or larger earthquakes around the world with catastrophic consequences in most cases. There have also been, we should not push that away, 34 earthquakes between magnitude 6 and 6.9. So yes, when you look at this year and the damages and the catastrophes, it's absolutely scary. And I think there is an obvious question. And I've seen the question being asked in the comments, is something changing, or has Shizzy already hit the fizzy? What's going on? Are the tectonic plates becoming more active? Are they like transferring like a ping pong effect? These earthquakes around the world, are we seeing some kind of global earthquake escalation? Guys, I can tell you this year, we will see more of that. We will. Probably 4 to 5 above magnitude 7, maybe even 1 magnitude 8. This definitely, and I'll tell you why. So could these massive earthquakes be somehow connected? Or does 2026 look like extraordinary because some of the earthquakes this year have been so incredibly destructive? But why have they been so destructive? I went through the numbers for you guys, and I found something. There's one comparison that completely changes how we have to look at that. But first, let's have a look at how we got here. The first magnitude 7 earthquake of 2026 happened in February 22nd, magnitude 7.1 near Kota Belud, Malaysia. This one was extraordinary for a completely different reason. It happened at about 629 kilometers. That's 391 miles beneath the surface. That is extremely deep. Extremely deep, especially if you follow my channel and you've seen the recent depth. It's crazy. And remember that earthquake, because later it helps explain something very important about why two earthquakes with almost the same magnitude can have completely different consequences. After that one, we had March 24th, magnitude 7.5, 7.6 near Tonga. Another enormous earthquake, this one at a depth of roughly 234 kilometers, that's 145 miles. And then 6 days later, March 30th, magnitude 7.3 near Vanuatu. It was like the map was like bong, 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 right? And then only 2 days after that, no April Fool's joke, April 1st, magnitude 7.4 in Indonesia, east-southeast of Bitung. Think about that sequence for a moment. 7.5, 7.3, 7.4, 3 magnitude 7 plus earthquake in a little more than a week. And if you were watching the global earthquake map at the time, it already looked remarkable, right? But it wasn't finished. On April 20th, magnitude 7.4 offshore of Miyako, Japan. Then there was a little bit of a pause with the magnitude 7 activity until June. And this is where the year suddenly became much, in big letters, much more difficult to ignore when it comes to earthquakes. The fatal June 7th, magnitude 7.8 in the Philippines, southwest of Cablalan on Mindanao. At 7.8, this became the largest earthquake of 2026 at that point. But then there came June 24th, Venezuela, first a magnitude 7.2. And before the shaking even ended, 39 seconds later, magnitude 7.5. Not hours later, not the following day. 39 seconds, guys, that's nothing. USGS describes that first magnitude 7.2 as foreshock of the larger 7.5. That alone is crazy, right? The consequences, Venezuela, I mean, we have that in our minds still. They were catastrophic, they are catastrophic. We're looking at more than 6,000 people probably lost already, and the numbers are still going up. So now imagine what it looks like to somebody who has been following earthquakes all year. And I know you do, guys, we all do, right? 3 major earthquakes packed together around the end of March and beginning of April. Then Japan, then 7.8 Philippines, then the two big ones in Venezuela. And less than 1 month later, it happened again, July 17th, off southern Mexico, magnitude 7.3. And this one was shallow, 19 kilometers only, that's 12 miles deep. But then, guys, crazy as it is, August 10th, boof, Colombia, 7.4, epicenter was only 5 kilometers from 3 miles, densely populated San Jose de Palmar. The earthquake itself, yes, it was much deeper, roughly 110 kilometers, that's 68 miles. Yet, even at that depth, the destruction, guys, you remember I've reported about this, was enormous, at least 300 people lost, and then crazy as it is, just days later came the Flores earthquake, eastern Indonesia, very shallow, magnitude 7.7, buildings and homes collapsed. And we're still dealing with the aftershocks that are crazy because there's so many and they're so big. This is a big mystery. Check out the video on the end screen. Landslides blocked the roads, communications were disrupted. Tsunami warning sent people running towards higher ground, and we did have a tsunami, 12, 16 feet, meter 60. By August 18, at least 53 people had been reported lost and around 5,000 evacuated. And with that earthquake, the number reached 11. 11 earthquake above magnitude 7+. Here they are together. I'm showing you the list here. If we look at that list, I completely understand why you guys are asking, is this still normal? Can this still be normal? Especially the images that we're getting out of Venezuela, right? Colombia, Philippines, Indonesia. Because 11 earthquakes above magnitude 7 sounds like an enormous number. But it's taking a strange turn right now, and I'll tell you why. I went back 1 year to 2025. We all remember Kamchatka, magnitude 8.8. How many magnitude 7 or larger earthquake did we have last year? Maybe you don't remember that many of them, right? Were there any super spectacular ones? In the negative way, catastrophic ones, I don't want to call it spectacular. More than this. The number is, guess what, guys? 16. 16. There were 15 earthquakes between magnitude 7 and 7.9, plus the extraordinary magnitude 8.8 Kamchatka earthquake in Russia. So 16 major earthquakes in 1 year. So now we're heading towards the end of August, September, October, November, December. We have 4 months left. So put this in perspective, right? It puts our year, what's happening right now, in some context, but it's still unusual. USGS tells us in the long term, the Earth produces approximately 16 major earthquakes per year average, and 15 in the magnitude 7 range, and approximately 1 magnitude 8 or greater. So we could still have 5 more magnitude 7 plus this year, and we could still see, unfortunately, a magnitude 8 or higher. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. But there's even a better comparison that puts this in perspective. So we're in August. Instead of comparing 11 earthquakes with a complete 12-month average, how many should we expect to have seen by this point this year? If we go after the statistics, what's normal? So there is a paper of an earthquake seismologist with Natural Resources Canada that did this calculation for an article. His name is John Cassidy. So the expected number that we should have by now this year is roughly 12. The actual number, 11. Guys, in other words, if we're looking purely at the number of significant major earthquakes, 2026 isn't running dramatically above average. It's actually remarkably close to what would be expected in a normal year. But that creates a much more interesting mystery. Because if the number of these giant earthquakes isn't unusually high, why does 2026 feel so extreme? And it does. And the pictures, they are extreme. The answer is hiding inside those first earthquakes that I showed you. Remember Malaysia, magnitude 7.1, enormous earthquake, but very, very deep. I told you, remember the number, 629 kilometers deep. Now compare that with the magnitude 7.3 off the coast of Mexico, only around 19 kilometers deep. That difference matters enormously. The farther seismic waves have to travel to reach up to the surface, the more energy generally diminishes, right? So you don't feel it that hard on the surface. A very deep magnitude 7 earthquake can therefore produce a completely different experience at the surface than a shallow magnitude 7 occurring directly beneath or beside a densely populated area. But the depth is only part of it. The location matters, right? How close is the earthquake to people? How many people are exposed to the strongest shaking? What kind of ground is underneath them? And perhaps, maybe most importantly, what are the buildings made of? I mean, thankfully, the 8.8 Kamchatka, there was population, but we were not talking about millions of people, and it was not directly underneath a big city compared to the shizi that hit the Fizi in Venezuela. And what are the buildings made of? That is very important. Which regions are hit this year with what kind of buildings? That is actually one of the major points that an earth science professor at the Western University also made an article about, Robert Sherbakov. Shallow earthquake generally has greater potential to produce intense ground shaking nearby. We know that. But whether that shaking becomes a catastrophe also depends enormously on the structures that are sitting on top of that ground, right? Japan, let's take Japan as an obvious comparison. Modern Japanese buildings operate under extremely demanding seismic standards, and older structures already often have been retrofitted. So take similar shaking that occurs in Japan and put it underneath a region filled with vulnerable masonry or cement towers or poorly reinforced concrete like Venezuela, and the human outcome can be radically different, and unfortunately that's the case this year. And that may be the real reason why this year feels so relentless, not because the Earth is actually necessarily producing an extraordinary number of major earthquakes, but because unfortunately we were unlucky this year. Several of these big earthquakes have struck close or right underneath major, highly densely population centers and vulnerable communities when it comes to the buildings and structures. That is exactly what the scientists point out as the unusual feature of this year. There is something unusual. The numbers themselves are not exceptional, but the impacts are. But there's still one question left. So because if 11 earthquakes isn't statistically extraordinary, look at the timing. 3 giant earthquakes close together this year, the Philippines, 2 in Venezuela, Mexico, Colombia, Indonesia. Could one enormous earthquake be setting off another one somewhere else on Earth? Lots are around the Pacific Ring of Fire, right? Is there a domino effect moving through the tectonic plates? This idea, of course, yeah, I know, it's incredibly tempting because all of Earth's tectonic plates are basically ultimately part of the planet. And that's why there's life on the planet, because of earthquakes and tectonic plates moving. I have made a video about that, actually. Not many of you were interested in that, by the way. I don't understand why. But that does not mean every large earthquake is mechanically connected to the next large earthquake that is thousands of miles away. The basic driver of these earthquakes is much slower. We know, guys, tectonic plates are constantly moving. They're like swimming. So at a typical rate of roughly like 5, 6, or 7 centimeters per year, around 2 to 3 inches. Doesn't sound much. That's about the speed with which your fingernails are growing. Almost nothing, right? But let that continue for a century and let the energy build up. 2 to 3 inches can become several feet or several meters, like 23 feet. Faults can remain locked while that movement continues. That's the dangerous part. So the stress is accumulating, and eventually that fault can no longer hold it and it ruptures, right? That process is happening independently along active plate boundaries all over the world. Independently, guys. Indonesia, Japan, Tonga, Vanuatu, Philippines, Mexico, South America, all of these regions sit within enormous active tectonic systems, and sometimes major earthquakes will occur unusually close together in time. They just do. And our brains, unfortunately, are extremely good at looking at that cluster and seeing a pattern, seeing a like, wow, right? We're bound to like, so, but there's another number that puts it into perspective. Worldwide, roughly 20,000 earthquakes are located every year. That works out to basically, guys, 55 earthquakes every single day. Most are small. Most never become international news. Most don't produce these horrifying images and videos. And that is extremely important because we don't experience earthquakes as statistics. We experience them through images, a building folding into itself, like Venezuela, these pancaking towers, roads splitting apart, tsunami warning flashing onto a phone, rescuers searching through rubble, housing collapse, right? We see, and if we see enough of these images in a short period of time, like we're doing right now, it feels as if the planet itself has changed, right? Something's going on. That feeling is real, but it's not the same thing as real evidence that the underlying global earthquake rate has changed. So we can finally answer the question that I started with. Is Earth suddenly producing an abnormal number of massive earthquakes? Based on data that we have right now, the answer is a clear no. 11 magnitude 7 plus earthquake by this point at 2026 is frightening, but unfortunately the expected number is roughly at 12, and 2025 finished with 16. So there's more to come. There's absolutely more to come. So if you see headlines in the news, oh my God, global doomsday, more to come, I predict the next big earthquake. Well, guys, we have 4 months left, and technically we could see 5 more earthquakes in that number. So I predict, guys, I feel it. The next big one is coming. Everything's lining up on Earth, and it's, you know, and then when it comes, everyone will like say, oh my God, she knew it. Well, I like statistic and I like numbers, right? So let's not make this doomsday scenario. This can be predicted in somewhat if we look at the average numbers. 4 months, we could see 5 more, at least, right? But again, let's not wipe away what is unusual about this year and how unusual it feels because of where several of these earthquakes have struck. They struck close enough to people, vulnerable buildings, and infrastructure to turn a normal geological events into enormous human disasters. And in many of these areas, the scientists have been warning for years, sometimes for decades, that a big one will happen eventually. And they said, prepare building codes. But in some of these countries, it was hard politically or economically to do these things. So our planet is not suddenly exploding. The numbers absolutely do not support that. So don't be shocked if we see more earthquakes. Hopefully with locations offshore, not tsunami producing, hopefully not underneath major population hubs, so that we can hopefully not see any more images like Venezuela. But even if we do, it's still within the norm. This is what Earth is doing. A year can look violent and be statistically normal. But something that is absolutely unusual is these aftershocks that this video here. Check it out because this is crazy. But also Spain. Now we thought we have a main shock 3 days ago with the 5.2 that collapsed buildings. No, we have the same again. So the aftershocks did not decrease. They went up again. Shaking, crazy videos of today's shaking. It's in the end screen. Stay safe, guys. I see you very soon. Bye-bye.